Okay, let's test. Okay, let's test the audio of the voice. 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 Okay, there's something doing loop back, loop back, loop back, loop back, loop back. Okay, found it. Perfect. So, we are live. Hello musici, let's continue our journey. Hello musici, let's continue our journey together with Riepel, and we are at the end because we have already finished the book to read the original book. Now we are just reading the commentary, which contains a lot of things. Last episode was a little boring, but now we have many examples, so this part will be much more interesting. Now we stopped here. Creation of and relations among commas. In the discussion that leads up to the enumeration of Riepel's first two methods of prolongations, the preceptor shows how commas can be differentiated from cesuras, which are lower level segment punctuation. So, cesura, comma, cadence. Cesura, comma, cadence. This process of differentiation does not, of course, increase the length of a word, but it does open the way for the multiplication of caesuras in comma-defined phrases of more than 4 bars. And in the same span of pages, Riepel's Preceptors introduces some observations, neither for the first time nor for the last, governing the proper order and relations among commas. For example, between two equivalent commas, there should certainly be placed a cadence or a different sort of comma, except if the second comma punctuated segment is a repetition or untransposed variation on the first. And the discantist later dutifully reserves that the commas and cadences speak with one another in an orderly fashion. A maxim already supported by the discussion of logic that immediately precedes this treatment of prolongation. After moving on to internal phrase expansion, insertion, and repetition of cadences, Riepel's Preceptors returns to the relations among commas and cadences and how these relations can form a hierarchy. The discussion that follows includes Riepel's concept of the compositional miniature and the personification of the local key areas as a hierarchy of cooperating frameworks, two metaphors that have attracted modern commentary. Read the theories of Riepel, Ars Combinatoria. Okay. Those two metaphors, the compositional miniature and the hierarchy of key areas, are related. So the steward, the foreman, the laborer. The concept of compositional miniature arises from Riepel's advice about the adequate preparation for a cadence on the fifth degree when it occurs just before the medial double bar of a binary form movement. But in general, a changing comma cadence, so to the fifth degree, it's very important before the cadence on the first degree in general. The outline of such a binary form movement, the discantist observes, could be reduced in stages to letter C, G, C. The preceptor observes that the minuets and allegro movement just previously examined restrict their commas and cadences to those belonging to the keys of the first and fifth degree, as if a steward and his foreman work in the field and speak to each other with perpetual questions and answers. C is like the steward, and G is like the foreman. This prompts the discantist to expand the analogy to an entire hierarchy of 7 farm workers. 7 with a black gradle, yes, representing the local tonic chord and key based on the 6 scale degrees, the hexachord, to which a perfect fifth can be added within a given diatonic scale. This is the alarm clock, which is ringing. Let me switch it off. Here it is. Okay, now it's good. Perfect. Okay, we're back. So, representing the local tonic chords and keys based on the 6-degree scale, the hexachord, to which a perfect fifth can be added within a given diatonic scale, plus the minor chord and key parallel to the overall major tonic. This will in turn open the way to Riepel's consideration of expanded harmonic plans. These local keys will be represented in more extended miniatures, and a discussion of the proper ordering, preparation, and weighting of modulations will ensue. But before this, the preceptor inserts a curious digression that has never been the subject of the comment in scholarship. This digression is a story about the South American sloth, an animal, so it's pretended here, which requires 2 days to climb up a tree, and 2 more days to climb down, and which sings at night, also very slowly, the 6th diatonic scale degree just mentioned, ascending and descending very slowly by step. The preceptor's point, I believe, is to emphasize that the 6th scale degree can be found in a compositional miniature, and that are personified by 6 of the 7 farm workers, should unfold in actual music the slow pace of the sloth imagined nocturnal song. These diatonic scale degrees, or more properly the local keys of which they become to the tonic notes, will be prolonged in Riepel's examples by aggregating the tonic commas, changing commas, and cadences possibly repeated in each of the local key chosen, as well as by the other means of prolongation listed above and discussed below. Thus, the sloth's slow song symbolizes the slow pace of local keys rhythm. After assigning to each local tonic note the name of a farmer worker, each one precisely placed within a social hierarchy, the preceptor illustrates in example 569 a modulation scheme using all the local keys in the order C, so the steward, G, so the foreman, the steward again, the chief med, the assistant med, F, the day laborer, D, the errand girl, C, the steward, C minor, the black gradle, and C major, the steward again. Immediately afterward, in example 570, he re-emphasized the supremacy of the overall tonic key by showing how to modulate from it directly to each one of the other 6 local keys represented in his farm worker hierarchy. Riepel's preceptor further suggests that the key of the 4th degree is best left by means of the rising sequence Mi, Fa. The minor keys of the 2nd and 6th degrees are better followed by the descending sequence De Fonte, while the 5th degree can be prolonged by the Ponte. This suggestion is communicated to the discantist and Riepel's readers by means of the written text, as well as by means of examples 571, 572, and 573. The preceptor warns, however, that in the allegro of a symphony or a concerto in C major, formal cadences are generally made only on C, G, and A. 1, 5, and 6. In fugues and some concerto movements, a cadence on E may replace a cadence on A. This is something that in the Suite and Dance Path course I've discovered. I have analyzed a lot of some pieces where the minor cadence in the middle of the second section is not a cadence to A but a cadence to E. This can be very common, especially in Italian style. Good morning, sir. Good morning to you. Okay. While the other keys should be suggested only by cesuras and or at most by commas. It does not specify whether tonic commas or merely changing commas on the applied dominant. Thus, yes, but it does not specify, but based on what we studied, what we analyzed, we have the changing comma at the fifth degree plus a tonic comma. So if we want to make a cadence to A, let's say E minor, we'll do a changing comma, and then to A minor we need a changing comma to the fifth degree, so B major, and then in the next phrase ending with the E minor this way. Thus, the hierarchy among keys, hence the large-scale rhythmic relations among the musical segments in those keys, is determined by pitch hierarchy, melopoeia, and the closely corresponding category of punctuation rather than by the relative length of each segment. Repetition. Although repetition is listed second in preceptor's enumeration of 5 means of technique of prolongation, it comes first in the discussion immediately preceding, and really it demonstrated and explained in many other places throughout Riepel's first 2 chapters, starting very near to the beginning. One of Riepel's more significant remarks about repetition, and one that goes to the heart of its relation to large-scale phrase rhythm, comes appropriately immediately after the fascinating passage about phrase structure and logic discussed above, continuing a series of trials in which he demonstrates his understanding of phrase expansion through repetition. The discantist offers to make 2 repetitions so that 12 measures result from it. With this example. So there is a repetition by means of the repetition here, and then by means of the repetition with the variations, of course, because mi, fa, sol, mi, fa, do, re, mi, fa, sol, mi, fa, fa. The preceptor accepts this without a single objection, for the ear always accepts such 12 measures as merely a reinforced 8th sum. Furthermore, as you have already heard in the first chapter, repetition do not easily spoil that. I think this means that the addition of repetition does not change the rhythmic identification of a basic phrase, so that in terms of rhythmopoeia, the 12 measures in example 505-2 are still to be considered an 8th sum, that is 2 4th sum, and so it should be with all expanded segments. Exactly as stated by the preceptor, repetition is the principal means of expansion and explored in the first chapter of Riepel's treatise. In this connection, he first illustrates and explains the use of a clause, a melodic segment, usually 2 measures long, often either the first half of a complete 4-bar melodic segment or as a segment inserted between 2 such segments, but belonging to neither. A clause is often harmonically static, cantabile in style, and suitable for repetition and or recurrence. Hence, Riepel's term sweet repetition clause. The entries for repeat, repeated, and repetition in the index and at the end of this volume show how numerous and widely dispersed are Riepel's discussions of this prolongation technique. Many of these indexed discussions and their related musical examples describe and illustrate the uncompleted repetition of entire half movement periods in binary form of complete comma or cadence punctuated segments with or without variation. Another sizable number of these references deal with the sweet repetition of clause, but the rest of the indexed pages explore the partial or elided repetition of segments that notably contribute to avoidance of four-square phrasing and can involve complexity that invites further exploration here. Let examples 5 to 1 stand for many. The numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 have been added to Riepel's examples here in order to clarify the repetition that has been added with the prime used to signify a variation. Or one and two, 1 and 2, which means repetition. Hello Dylan, I know that you're here. Mi, fa, sol, mi, fa, mi, re, mi, fa, sol, mi, fa, mi, re, do. So here repeating this 2 plus 2, and in the following one repeating the 4, 3, 3, 4, and 3, 4, 3, 4, and 3, 4. Fa, la, sol, do, re, ti, fa, re, fa, la, sol, fa, mi, fa, re, fa, la, sol, fa, mi, sol, mi, fa, mi, re, do. Internal expansion through, so another element now. Internal expansion through elaboration or insertion of derived or unrelated material. Riepel's examples show that any measure or metrical unit in a forza might, under the proper circumstances, be immediately repeated singly or as group combined with its neighbors, and that such a repetition might continue within the limits of taste and judgments. The really interesting examples, however, combine variation with repetition or carry variation to the point of a substitution, which Riepel is likely to call expansion. To clarify and illustrate this, I offer the illuminating series of examples from to which I've added the numbers 1, 2, and 3, and 4 to identify the 4 metrical units of the original forza, with prime, double prime, and triple prime added to identify variants of, or if you prefer, substitution of the 4 metrical units of the original forza. I have replaced these modified examples in my translation of Riepel's dialogue in order to retain context. Although it is almost indistinguishable from the previous 2 prolongation, I would not have thought it readily. I like it above all else. But you have only prolonged the cesura segment. With your permission, I will include the comma segment together, namely. So this is the simple comma segment. Sol, fa, mi, do, fa, mi, la, sol, fa, mi, re, mi, do. And then there are the other the prolongations. So sol, fa, ti, ta, fa, la, ti, ta, 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 fa, la, sol, mi, sol, fa, mi, do, ti, ta, fa, la, so, ta, ti, ta, ti, ta, ta, ra, ta. So that this section 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 is repeated, cesura, and then we have, it says 2, 3, 3, 3. Whoa, wait. Something is going strange here, because this is 3, 4, and 3, 4. Mi, fa, sol, mi, fa, sol. So 3, 4, and 3, 4. La, so, and 3, 4. No, I don't know what's doing here, because if we check, there is a D exactly as in 4, and so it should be 3 4. Stop. Now I see that I've made the comma segment 2 measures shorter than the caesura segment. The comma segment 2 measures shorter, because there are 6 bars instead of 8. Therefore, I will quickly just let it be. Let it be, actually. Imagine at this point of it should start let it be. Let me find the score. Imagine Riepel singing let it be. Let it be. I know that he wrote let it be, John Lennon, right? Because he read Riepel. I'm totally sure. So it is. Therefore, now I see that I have made the comma segment 2 measures shorter than the caesura segment. Therefore, I will quickly just let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. One often sees, even in good compositions, and that continues, that the comma segment is longer than the caesura segment. Okay, good. Now let's get serious and let's continue. Okay, another example: sol fa pa la so ta pa fa la sol fa mi la sol fa mi pa pa pa. Then okay, 1 2 1 2 1 2. That's clear. Then I even here don't understand these 2 annotated by the editor, because here there's a caesura. Then fa re fa la sol fa mi re sol da 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 mi fi sol sol fa da da di pi tom pom. I recognize this structure actually. 1 and 2 plus 1 and 2, and then another color 1 and 2 plus 1 and 2 actually. So 1 and 2, 1 and 2, and 1 and 2. This. Okay. Then they sometimes flow smoothly into the ear, as if they were both of the same length, if perhaps not more smoothly. It pleases me anew to hear this. Besides, I notice that repetition can likewise help expansion. Sol fa pa 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 do da do da sol fa mi la sol fa la fa sol mi fa mi re fa la sol mi fa mi re fa la sol sol fa mi re da 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 di di tum pa da 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 di di tam pom. So this phrase now is it's repeated. Certainly, namely, not the variations. May I also sometimes deceive the ears a little by means of an occasional separation of two sums? Okay, there's a two sum, two sum, two sum, two sum, two sum. Let's see. Which is just the annotated version, eh? No, it's not the same thing. Two sum, two sum, two sum, because there is a two sum here. But then the repeated section is this one now, another repeated section. So instead of repeating this, another repetition. Okay. You can write such passages 3 or 4 times per year, for I find that the two sum is not just separated, but rather a bit confused by means of veiled notes. Yes, because there are veiled notes at the end. There's the repetition here and here, but the other section, the orange bar, is a little different. So it's a repetition, quite fluid repetition. Let's see where is the next resting when. Okay, a further technique of expansion. So okay, no, here we can arrive at the insertion. So in annotating example 545, I've also added brackets at the word two sum in 4 places in order to illustrate this cantist's offer to deceive the ears a little by means of an occasional separation of two-sum. Riepel had introduced the technique of separating two-sum much earlier in chapter 1, and this is the relevant place to recall his examples because his earlier uses of separation are certainly instances of internal expansions through insertion or of unrelated material. We may call this technique dividing one phrase by insertion of another. Riepel's first two illustrations of this technique are found in examples 91 and 95, offered by the discantist but rejected by the preceptor. Here is the first of these. The second one, example 95, is the same but merely transformed from 3/4 to 2/4 meter through the use of syncopation. From 3/4 to 2/4. Let's see. And then it says not good. Ah, okay, because divided, this section passes here. So no, they should be, okay, good. However, in this reaction, the discantist later aptent, in this reaction to the discantist later aptent, the preceptor merely admonishes that is quite equivalent solution. Indeed, it is almost too strange. In example 149, I've added the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 in order to point out the undivided, divided, and inserted foursome. The divided foursome result in two separated twosome. Let's see. 1, 2, dum, da, mi, fa, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, fa. Where this is divided. Fa, 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 mi, la, sol, 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 fa, mi, la, sol, sol, sol. Fa, mi, fa, re, mi, fa, sol, la, fa, mi, fa. Fa, mi, la, sol, fa, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, fa, mi, fa. Fa, mi, re, ut. Okay. A further technique for expansion from within a comma or cadence defined phrase is the shift from the common time to alla breve style. So a further technique for expansion from within a comma or cadence defined phrase is the shift from a common time to alla breve style. This does not involve insertion of material, but it does result in a phrase that is longer than 4 metrical units as initially established. Alla breve style was explained near the beginning of the stay, and explanations and examples of its use can be located with the index to the translation. In example 600, the concluding note of the cadence has been added along with the usual numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 to identify the components of a regular cadence defined phrase. This is Mozart style. A shift, but divine Clementi, it's a style. A shift to alla breve style or back to the common time can be applied to any single group of metrical units within a comma or cadence defined phrase, or to any portion of an insertion. For that, the matter will be clear when we examine Riepel's extended examples below. A shift to alla breve style or back to common time can be applied to any single group of metrical units within a comma or cadence defined phrase, or to any portion of an insertion, for that matter, as will be clear when we examine Riepel's extended examples below. Okay, but we'll continue this in the next video because this has become already quite long. So see you in the next video. I'm here. I'm going to continue right now. Just have to take Kleenex. Where are they? And put an exportation. Yes. All right. Here we are. MP4. Good. Let me see where I put my Kleenex. Okay, here we are. Mm. Mm. Okay. Hello Musici, welcome to this new video of Riepel. Let's continue our journey reading the commentary. We are almost at the end of the book. Insertion now between comma-defined phrases. Riepel's simplest illustration of this technique in example 599, while not typically its brevity, makes the concept perfectly clear. Let's play it. No, pom, la la, sol, fa, la la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. And then with the insertion here, the insertion, let's say, goes in this point. So, do, re, mi, fa, mi, do, do, sol, fa, mi, fa, la, sol, fa, mi, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. Good. Riepel introduces this technique with very little commentary, but it turns out to be the most important and most often used of the expansion techniques differentiated in history. In the quoted dialogue given below, Riepel's musical examples have been modified by the addition of numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, which refer to the functions that constitute a comma-defined phrase or segment. The fourth way to prolong a melody is the insertion, which is called parenthesis claudatur, parenthetical close in Latin. First, I will just set out a quite plain opening. Let's see. Do, mi, sol, fa, mi, do, fa, sol, fa, mi, fa, do, sol, fa, sol, fa, mi, fa, mi, re. And now I will, Riepel says, I will insert, say, 4 measures here. These are the 4 measures. Do, mi, sol, fa, mi, do, fa, sol, fa, mi, fa, do, sol, la, sol, fa, sol, do, fa, mi, re, mi, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, mi, fa, la, sol. Or, with the insertion of another thing, why is not writing? Okay. So we have this from or. Do, mi, sol, fa, mi, do, fa, sol, fa, mi, fa, do, re, la, fa, mi, re, do, re, sol, do, ti, re, do, re, mi, fa, mi, fa, mi, re. And this can be done not only at the beginning but throughout whether desired. Although Riepel does not comment on this insertion, it is clear that although they are each 4 measures long, they are not true comma-defined phrases because are as semi-sequence or sequence with 2 members ending similarly. They each constitute an assemblage of 2 caesuras defined twosome without the subject predicate. Call and response relationship found in true foursome. We will return to this matter under the heading an 8-some phrase below. This explains why a stereotyped pattern of the Monte, Fonte, or Ponte category, as discussed above, usually constitutes an insertion between comma-defined phrases rather than a comma-defined phrase in its own right, as illustrated in example 533, 536, and 537. In some cases, 2 caesuras defined twosome can become a comma-defined foursome through the mere expedient of changing the second caesura into a comma, thereby making it respond to the first caesura rather than allowing it to remain a sequentially parallel replication of the first caesura. Example 530 illustrates this point. Still, in general, according to Riepel theory, an exact sequence is normally to be considered an insertion between comma-defined phrases, and this generally has been used very fruitfully to refine the 12th-20th century concept of the Fortspinnungstypus phrase and movement construction. In example 549 above, the insertion of parenthetical clause takes the form of a semi-sequence and a sequence. Much earlier in the treatise, in example 107, Riepel showed an insertion between comma-defined phrases that instead a repeated twosome numbers added to identify showed an insertion between comma-defined phrases that is instead a repeated twosome numbers added to identify comma-defined foursome. Okay, comma-defined foursome. Do, mi, fa, sol, fa, la, sol, fa, mi, re, mi, fa, do, ro, pa, po, pam, pam, do, fa, mi, re, pam, pa, pam, fa, mi, sol, re, mi, fa, mi. So the repetitions are between the 2 defined foursome. Foursome number 1, foursome number 2, or better, this foursome, 3 foursome, and the 2 repetitions, it creates a new foursome. Note that Riepel identifies the 2 twosome as a close. The 2 twosome as a close. Okay, the resulting four measure because pa, 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 pum, 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 pa, pa, pum, pa, pum, pum, pum. The resulting four measures do not constitute a comma-defined phrase. The resulting four measures do not constitute a comma-defined phrase because the two sums are the same and therefore cannot constitute a subject and a predicate. The clause marked in example 120 has the same characteristic but is made up instead of a threesome and is repetition. Examples 93 and 98 contain with what amount to clauses inserted between comma-defined phrases, but they are not marked or in any way identified as such in the text. As mentioned in the glossary of translated terms, the segments that Riepel labels as clause, repetition clause, and suite repetition clause are generally harmonically stated in cantabile style. About half of these clauses comprise metrical units 1 and 2 of a comma-defined foursome together with their immediate repetition. One involves the repetition of metrical units 3 and 4. Four of them might be judged to constitute comma-defined foursome, but in a series of extended examples to be discussed later, comparisons with related examples reveal the presence of greatly extended, highly elaborate clauses inserted between comma-defined phrases and containing repetitions and other forms of internal expansion, such as pitch alteration, in which the rhythmic and melodic contour of a segment, typically one metrical unit, are repeated with minor or pattern changes in melodic pitches, and often with such non-modulating modification of harmony as exchange between tonic and dominant chords. These clauses constitute major portion of the complete symphonic movement, represented by Riepel's extended examples and in the actual repertoire to which he refers. Doubling of cadences, which is a new topic here, the doubling of cadences. Let's see, okay. Extension to phrases, so we can write, yes. Let's go. Now, doubling of cadences. A cadence-defined phrase may be repeated, with or without variation, just as any other phrases. The third and the fourth metrical unit of such a phrase can also be repeated, with or not. These instances would be covered by two of the techniques already discussed. The separate technique called doubling of cadences includes, in addition, the duplication of a cadential function by the addition of a second, third, cadence-defined phrase with the same category of conclusion, perhaps with the first cadence modified so as to render it unconclusive as in the example. Let's see. So that we have an unconclusive cadence because reaching the third, not the octave, and then a conclusive cadence because reaching the octave. And the category includes repetitions or additions of cadence-defined phrases, whose first metrical unit replaces the concluding unit of the immediately preceding cadence-defined phrase, by a technique called cutting away, which today might instead be called elision or overlap. Riepel illustrates this by modifying the foursome shown in example 551. Example 551 annotated. Fa, fa, mi, re, mi, fa, sol, la, fa, mi, re, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, mi, vi, fa, mi, re, mi, do. Okay. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, mi, fa. La, do, fa, mi, re, re, do. Example, okay, example 552 shows a modification of example 551 using the process of cutting away. I've marked this by the notation 1 equal 4, indicating that the fourth bar of example 552 functions both as the fourth metrical unit of the first phrase and the metrical unit of the second phrase. Here, so we can say that they overlap. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then 1, 2, 3, and 4. Indicate, okay. Actually, the fourth bar of example 552 combines the initial note C from the fourth bar of example 551 with the note A from bar 5. This A is here of example 551. In addition, it is understood that the note C in bar 4 of example 552 is harmonized with the triad of the sixth degree inasmuch as the note is marked by a cross indicating the false and deceptive cadence according to note included within example 550. Let's see. So if I have to write a bass here, I would write fa, mi, re, mi, fa, sol, la, mi, re, dol, la, sol, mi, fa, la, sol, mi, fa, mi, re, do, this bass. So, of course, to be played an octave higher, but sol, la, for example. Mi, re, G sharp is not necessary. Mi, re, do, la, then la, fa, mi, re, mi, fa, mi, re, mi, fa, mi, re, mi, fa, sol, mi, fa, sol, do. So mi, fa, sol, do. This way. Good. As a summary of several points introduced here and above, examples 270 and 271 make an instructive pair because they illustrate a combination of cutting away of commas and shift between alla breve and common style, including the situation in which two measures in 2/4 make up each single alla breve style foursome is cut away in favor, make up each single alla breve metric unit. In example 270, the fourth bar of the first alla breve style foursome is cut away in favor of a repetition of its own second metric unit. This in Italian gesture means to cut away, or when someone is talking too much at the phone and you have to say something, you say cut the line, cut. This. Like scissors. You use scissors this way, but this is the shape. But the conclusion of this partial foursome repetition is itself cut away, as shown in example 271, where, however, the first cut away from example 270 is the 270 is designated. Is disentangled. Okay. Presto. Let's see. Oh, I like these pages with a lot of examples. Sol, re, fa, pa, 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 actually, I think I'm reading wrong, not correct in the rhythm. Pam 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 pa pa pam pam pa 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 pam pam pa pa pam. Sol, mi, re, sol, mi, sol, fa, mi, sol, la, sol, mi, sol, fa, mi, la, sol, fa, mi, la, fa, la, sol, mi. And then original with original annotation by Riepel, where we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So alla breve 1, 2, 3, and 4. And bar number 4 consists with 2 and 3, as you can see, 2 or better 2, 3, where alla breve takes the double of the time, so 2 and 3 repetition, and or better, the number 1 is cutted away exactly. I mean these two sections are cutted away. Then 2 and 3, repetition of 2 and 3, and number 4, sol, fa, mi. This is 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4, creating a monte. Pam, 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 pam. Example 271 with original annotation by Riepel. But is it the same? No, another example. Pa, pam, pam, pa, la, sol, fa, ra, or faster. Pam, 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 pa, la, sol, fa, pa, 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 pom. Sol, re, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, so, what's happening? It's happening that 1, 2, 3, and the 4 is cutted away, and there is the new first bar of the following section. Okay, we can even read another paragraph. An 8-sum phrase. The example with a lot of cesuras. An 8-sum phrase, a special type of 8-bar segment, is shown in example 5 to 6. We shall call it henceforth or 8-sum phrase so that it can be properly identified when it occurs in a compound meter. Such as a normal nota alla breve common style. We call it henceforth an 8-sum phrase so that it can be properly identified when it occurs in a compound meter, okay, such as a normal nota alla breve common time, okay. Two-sum step up, right, then pam pa pa pam, fa fa mi fa re la sol fa mi re do, tonic comma, sol sol lam sol so mi fa sol fa re mi fa mi re do, fa mi re do, fa mi re. Good. This type of phrase is not given a name in Riepel's treatise, and the means of its construction are not included in his enumeration of expansion techniques, but it amounts to a comma-defined phrase of more than 4 metrical units, and because of this it belongs in a discussion of phrase lengthening. The discantist complains that 2 commas, example 5 to 6, seems too far apart. These 2 commas, the tonic comma and the changing comma, basically. Too far apart. But he admits that the resulting double length, half as shorter, Comma segments could be useful in lengthening a piece of music. Each 8-sum phrase in this example begins with a 2-sum that is immediately repeated one step higher or lower, followed by a regular comma-defined 4-sum. 8-sum phrases of the kind illustrated in example 5 to 6 are at least caesuras defined 4-sum of the kind that constitute the first half of such phrases can be seen in examples and the other example as annotated below. The preceptor illuminates this construction by demonstrating that the caesura in the fourth bar of example 5 to 6 could be transformed into a comma by altering its punctuating notes so as to respond to rather than to parallel the caesura punctuation in bar 2. This is demonstrated in the fragment of example 532 shown here. Good, but first of all, let's see the 2-sum repeated a step higher. Yes, a step higher, of course, without the up pick up upbeat note because it's part of a paired do re mi. Do, re, mi at the end. It's a do re mi. Do re mi. Yes. And then arriving with a comma. Then there is a sol mi pattern, very interesting. Another because they work very similarly in a very similar way. The do re mi and the sol fa mi, and then a 4-sum arriving to a conclusion with a changing comma. Now let's see this example. Pam pam pa 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 la la ri ra ton. What's happening here? We don't have anymore the rest of the caesura, but we have the dot. So instead of the caesura indicated by the by the 2 commas. The same comma punctuation could also be substituted for the caesura. The same comma punctuation could also be substituted for the caesura in bar 12 of example 5 to 6, except of course that each substitution would create an acceptable redundancy with the tonic comma in bar 8. The first 4 bars of example 5 to 6 might be thought of as derived from a normal comma-defined 4-sum, as illustrated in example 532, but the 8-sum construction shown in measure 1, 8, and 916 of example 5 to 6 is so common in the mid-18th century music that it would probably be preferable to consider it a thing into itself. 5 to 6 should be the previous one, right? Exactly. More on this point, the 8-sum construction shown in example 5 to 6 cannot be reduced to any shorter basic structure within Riepel's theoretical framework. They are not really expansion of anything, even though the technique of pitch alteration is used to create them. On the contrary, each of these 8-sum constructions could be self-expanded or extended by any of the means of discussion above. This is shown in the annotation in example 579, 590, and 604 below. While it is true that the first 4 bars of such an 8-sum could be removed without creating a theoretical problem, this initial 4-sum cannot routinely be considered as insertion between comma-defined phrases, inasmuch as a piece might easily begin with a segment of this type. It may be questioned that whether a 4-sum repetition clause, such as found in example 561, as annotated below, might be considered to function similarly as the first half of an 8-sum phrase, when it is completed by a following comma-defined 4-sum. Extension of phrases, but this is becoming very long because this video is 26 minutes, so we'll continue to read this in the next video. Okay, now let's see how long it's going to be starting from this point. So we have this section, extension of phrases, then I guess we will continue. Yeah, there are many examples now finally. Yeah? So the next top okay, so in the next video we can arrive up to the end of this section. Then there is another section about mid-18th century Berlin orchestral repertoire collected in Dresden. The origin and context for Joseph Riepel theories. And there should be other pieces. Okay, interesting. Johann Gottlieb Graun Concerto. Changing comma, yes. Then repetition. Yes, so we'll analyze this. Interesting. Yes, cool. But before, let's conclude the previous section. Reviewing Riepel's examples. From should be around here. Let's see. Exactly. Los Angeles, okay. Let's continue our journey together with Riepel and let's arrive to the conclusion of the commentary. Now, extension to phrases. All of Riepel's technique of phrase prolongation is discussed so far involve expansions from within. But there are several techniques illustrated, if not named, in his treatise that can lengthen a phrase by adding to its beginning or ending. In addition to doubling of cadences and commas, there are also extensions that follow the last punctuation of a phrase or precede its first metrical unit. A simple case of phrase extension involves preceding its first metrical unit with what Buddhai Buddha, the music Buddha, calls a bass leader, a bass leader, not leather, bass leader, as shown in example 185. Let's see. Ah, yes, before. Do, do, da, sol, fa, sol, mi, do. It would be logical to apply the term leader also to any accompaniment figure heard in preparation for a theme, although Riepel does not illustrate this common occurrence. 30. Okay, bass leader. This useful term is coined by Buddhai. Okay. Originally, the term Vorspann referred to an additional pair of horses harnessed ahead of the usual pairs of extra pulling power. The term was then taken over in reference to an extra locomotive added to the front of a train in preparation for an ascent to a mountain pass. But it may be the term Filmspan that inspired Buddha's coinage. This refers to the film's opening credits, especially if superimposed over actual footage. It is not an introduction, properly speaking, but a specialized part of the film narrative normally preceding the beginning of the action. This example appears in Riepel's blah, blah, blah. Whereas a bass or accompaniment leader might not be considered part of the melody, examples shows initial melodic activity that clearly belongs to the following phrase, but just as clearly does not count as its first metrical unit. Example 578 in fact begins with a modification of the second comma defined eighthsome of the second comma defined. So example 578 in fact begins with a modification of the second comma defined eighthsome, shown in example 576, the one we play, okay, as annotated below. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, with a changing comma. This is very important because I need to show you this to someone, so I'll take a very quick picture. Because that's a very important passage. Okay. Example 578 is clearly intended to illustrate the beginning of a movement, as indicated by the phrase of the tempo of a tempo marking. Thus, the first three quarters cannot be considered as an insertion between phrases. Neither Riepel nor Koch, not say Koch, have a name for this very common symphonic gesture, whose origin lies in the opening triple hammer stroke cliché of the Vivaldian concerto style. Other types of brief opening gesture unrelated to the triple hammer stroke are also used in 18th century symphonies for the same purpose. Riemann's term for all of these Vorhang probably chosen to parallel Koch terms used overhang, and so Überhang, overhang, and Anhang appendix for certain types of material added to the end of a melodic segment. However, the word Vorhang normally refers to a theatrical curtain, which could lead to a misunderstanding of the intended character and significance of its initial gesture, and its relation to that which follows. Exactly the same triple hammer stroke can be used to extend the concluding punctuation of a segment, as happens at the end of example 576. In this case, Cox's term overhang is exactly appropriate as an extension. Such an overhang does not affect the count of the metrical units, comprising the basic foursome. Example 604, annotated below, concludes with a rhythmically animated version of this type of overhang. Example 604, conclusion annotated. Mi fa sol, mi fa sol, pam, pam, pam. So extended eight-sum phrase, cesura defined for some with pitch alteration. Okay. Cadence unconclusive. Mi fa sol la, tonic cadence unconclusive, and then tonic cadence conclusive. Pam 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 pam. And the overhang here. Overhang, which means overhang. Okay. Example 199 shows some typical rhythmic variants of an overhang, of which the fourth is a triple hammer stroke. The triple hammer stroke. Or which, if you compose dances, for example, imagine to compose an allemande, it's very important after a cadence to add this. This is in polyphony with more notes, but that's it. Now, the next example here, pom pam pam. Okay, is another possibility. So, pa 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 la sol fa mi re do pam ram with the violin run, or ta pa sol la sol fa mi re sol do 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 do, or mi fa sol la sol fa mi re do 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 do. The main features of Joseph Riefel's theory of rhythmopoeia can be usefully illuminated by analytical annotation of his melodic outlines of complete symphony movement. These outlines are repeated here with addition of my own annotation consisting on numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 with primes and multiple primes to identify the essential metric units of the underlying comma or cadence defined foursome, together with their variance and replacement. Then notation 4 equal 1 or 4 equal the first unit of some other construction to identify instances of cutting away or elision. A verbal and symbolic marking of all commas and cadences. Words identifying means of expansion, extension, or prolongation discussed in Riepel's first two chapters. Let's see. Beginning of the first part. Comma, tonic comma. So we should expect a changing comma now. Yes, insertion of a fonte. Yes, fonte, but without the minor and major section as fonte, let's say fa sol sol fa sol la sol fa mi. It seems to me a printer. If I have to analyze this, I would consider this a printer, la sol fa mi, where fa mi re re, where we have, of course, 1, 2, 3, and 4. plus other 1, 2, 3, and 4, making a very long primer. La, sol, fa, mi, re, of course. So la, sol, fa, mi, re, and then the repetition close. Mi, sol, 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 mi, fa, mi, re, mi, sol, 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 mi, fa, mi, re, mi, re, do. Now, beginning of the second part. Need to move a little the keyboard, okay. Mi, fa, comma, tonic comma in the 5th degree, so G major. Sol, fa, sol, sol, fa, fa, mi, sol, la, fa, sol, fa, mi, even here, this section, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re. It's another primer, more than a fonte. I would consider this a primer. I don't agree with this insertion of a fonte. Then pam pa sol sol sol, the repetition close, okay. The sol sol sol, sol fa mi re. Why repetition close? Because it's something which is repeated 2 times. Then pam pam mi fa la la la, sol fa mi la, sol fa mi re do. Okay. Example 561 principally illustrates. So this is the previous one, right? Yes. Illustrate insertion between comma and cadence defined foursome. In each of the 2 parts of the movement, one foursome is preceded by a repetition clause, which could be considered to initiate an action phrase that is completed by the following comma defined foursome, as explained above. Blah blah blah. Let's continue. A new example, which is much longer. Let's see. So it's a 8-some phrase. Let's see. Pam 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 pa dun ta pam pam pa ti mi fa fa la fa mi fa. Cesura defined foursome shape. Okay. Cesuras because pam 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 pa dun tan pam pam pa pam. There's the repetition even a step higher, shaped by pitch alteration. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, fa, mi, fa. Ending with a tonic comma, true. Then cesura defined foursome shaped by pitch alteration, the same thing, but ending with a changing comma, very common. To don't have the 2 comma at the same times. Tonic comma and changing comma, or changing comma and tonic comma. Mi, fa, sol, fa, sol, la, fa, mi, re, do. Okay, now insertion of a fonte. It's a sol, fa, mi more a fonte, unless you do. Yes, but to be 100% fonte, we need the G sharp, because for the cadence to E minors, but here the bass is quite different than a fonte, so it's sol, fa, fa, mi. So, fa, mi, fa, this way. Then the repetition close. Ora pa 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 pa, so fa mi re mi, sol sol sol, fa mi re mi, do re mi fa sol la la, sol fa mi re do, sol sol. Repetition close with piano, sol sol sol, so fa mi re mi, sol sol sol, so fa mi re. mi fa la sol, mi fa sol, la fa ti ton 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 ton, and the final cadence. Okay, then cesura defined for some shape by pitch alteration, beginning of the second part, then cadence at the fifth, cadence in the fifth degree, of course, G major. So now changing comma on the fifth degree and back now to C major, to the steward. Pa pa fa la la sol fa mi re do, tonic comma after the changing comma, tonic comma. Fa fa la sol sol fa mi re mi fa sol la ta 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 ta. This is the preparation of the shift med, which is going to arrive the minor mode. Pam pa pam pa fa la sol fam pam pam. I don't agree with this font because at the end is something, yes, ascending, but it's not a true font in the harmonic structure. Okay. And cadence changing, so tonic cadence in the fifth degree, shift med. Pam pa pa pam 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 pa pa pam pam pa fa fa fa. This is a true font. Re mi fa sol ta ta sa sa la sol fa mi dom la sol fa mi la sol fa mi re do. Why this is a true font? Because it's to D minor and then to C major. Then piano, the black cradle, because it takes C minor. La fa mi pam pa pa pam pam pam. Changing comma. Tan, syncopation. Tan 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 la tan. Repetition with variation. Repetition with syncopations. Then forte. Do pam pam sol sol fa. The repetition of what we had before. So pam pam. To be, but the fold doesn't work here. It's a sol fa mi. Sol fa fa mi pa pam pa 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 sol sol fa. Weird repeat. Mi fa sol mi fa sol la sol 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 fa. Re mi fa sol fa mi. Do re mi sol 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 fa mi re mi sol 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 fa mi re. Mi do re mi fa sol la sol fa mi re do re do sol 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 fa mi re mi sol 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 mi fa mi la sol mi fa sol la fa mi re do re dom pa pa pam pam, and then overhand cadence. Okay, let's see what's written here. Most of the prolongation of in example 576 is created by the addition of a comma-defined phrase, phrases not found in example 571. Example 576 also features several comma-defined some initiated by Cesura's defined foursome, to which category might be added the four similar instances in which a repetition closed foursome is completed by a regular comma-defined foursome. Later, in example 589, Riepel's discanty specifically recognizes the first measures of example 576 as material that the supposedly anonymous composer repeats constantly with pitch alterations. This example also includes three instances of elision created by cutting a weight indicated by 4 equal. In the commentary associated with this example, Riepel's discantis admits that he added a 4-bar insertion at letter R, which could have been omitted. Actually, the 4 measure at letter R, which could have been omitted. Actually, the 4 measure at letter R form an insertion only with respect to the shorter version of the same material shown in examples 561. They do not constitute an insertion between or within common-defined segments, as they comprise a regular foursome and its repetition, each punctuated by a changing comma. The last measure of this example illustrates the type of extension that Koch would call an overhand, as discussed above. Okay, let's see how much long it's going to be, because maybe I can cut this into two sections. So we want, yes, because we want to arrive, yes, here. So, I mean, there are not so many words, but a lot of music to play. So in the next video, we'll complete the commentary by reading the last examples. Okay, now, because I can see, Dylan, you are online, I have to see what are the winter's days now. Are you online, Dylan? No, 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 incredible. I'm happy. I'm happy to see, because I have a um in 1 hour I have to leave because then I have an appointment. Or better, I have two appointments, but one at 12 and the other one at 15, so 3 p.m. And in the middle, I didn't know what to do and how to manage them. But out of the home, I have to go to do something, and I asked, but what could I do? And I see that today, only for today, in Italy, there's the big tasty here prom. So what's written here? Only €6. Honest. Big tasty bacon, or mac crunchy chicken, or mac crunchy chicken spicy BBQ menu at 6. So 5.99, but 6. Very nice. I really like the big tasty. I really like it. Here it is, the big tasty. Yeah, I remember a spot by Donald Trump about the big tasty. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Hello Musici, let's continue our journey with Riepel and we are about to end the commentary reading and playing the following musical examples. So we arrived here, okay, and we have to analyze this piece with the annotation of the editor of the modern edition, and even the following sinfonia. So we have 2 pieces and another one, so 3 pieces. Okay, before the end of the commentary, and of course a new interesting section, because what will follow are other interesting analyses actually. That's very nice, but first of all let's focus on this in this video to complete the commentaries to Riepel. Okay, let's play the following piece. Here it is. So cesura defined, let's go. So 8 sum phrase, cesura defined for sum shaped by pitch alteration. Pitch alteration means that it's, for example, ascending a step. Changing comma, then fonte, insertion of fonte, which I would call sol fa mi, as I've already explained. Sol 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 ti, sol 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 ti, pa pam 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 pa, mi sol 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 mi sol 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 sol. Insertion of an radically expanded monte, because the previous one was to C major. Now, so to make perceive this and this differently, the bass we could add can be fa, mi, fa, fa, mi, fa, mi, fa, mi, do, sol, do, so, do, re, because from this point it becomes do, re, do, re, la, re, fa. Then it could be pam, 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 pam. No, what do I do? Yes, A. No. Mistake. D. Then A here, D. Then C sharp, for example, again. F sharp, D, re, fa, 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 re, fa, 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 mi, so, 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 so. Then, but the very beautiful thing of this section is that this can be put in canon. If we have for example, the first violin and the bass. Sol, fa, sol, fa, sol, fa, mi, where there is the repetition, because 1, 2, 1, 2, then 1 and 2, and sol, fa, pam, 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 pa. Pam, 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 and no, you want it. Sol, sol, la, fa, mi, sol, la, fa, mi. Repetition close because it's repeated. Fa, mi, intesto, and now a new foursome is starting, because this note is for the ending of the previous phrase, but the beginning of the new one. Pam pam para pa 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 pam, black cradle. Fa mi re mi la sol fa mi re do ton ton ton, and then cadence to the fifth degree. Pam pam para pam pa pa pam pa pam pam pa re mi re mi fa sol do so so sol mi re do do, changing comma because here I guess the second part is starting, if I remember. Yes, because again the insertion of the fonte sol fa mi, sam pa pam 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 pa pa pam pam pa pam 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 pa pa pam pa 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 pa, repetition close, the other repetition close, sol fa, repetition close veered through pitch alteration, mi sol re fa mi sol do mi sol fa la sol fa mi fa re mi fa sol fa la sol fa mi fa re mi fa sol fa la do re mi fa sol la sol fa mi re do re mi fa sol la sol fa mi fa re mi fa sol fa la sol fa mi fa re mi fa sol fa mi re do re mi fa sol la sol fa re do re mi fa sol la sol fa. What's happening here? We have already analyzed this in the Riepel's textbook, in the Riepel's book, in the original section. Here we have the repetition of all of this, the repetition of the so the variation of the repetition clause according to the descending third pattern: C major, then A minor, F major, D minor, and then repetition clause there through repetition through pitch alteration, but that's the other one because we are moving back to G major. Mi re mi do re mi fa sol fa mi sol do, again tanti sol mi fa mi do mi sol la fa la tri do sol la sol fa sol fa mi do pam sol la fa mi. Repetition close there through pitch alteration, sol la fa mi sol la fa mi sol la fa mi sol fa mi re do. Then expanded eighth-sum phrase, cesura defined fourth-sum shade by pitch alteration. Let's see. Do re mi fa mi okay, the expansion is because we have this repeated 3 times, one more than what we had at the beginning, if we remember. 1, 2, 3, indeed. There are only 2, 3, and 3, but now 3, 3, 1, and 3, 2. Yes. So, from this point, insertion of the fonte, repetition close, sol fa di re do sol fa mi sol mi. Then it changes because repetition close, but mi sol sol. The fourth degree with the flat, veered through pitch alteration, fa la sol fa mi re mi re do, and cadence fa sol re fa sol do, and the end. That's a very beautiful symphony. The commentary on example 579, which Riepel provides through the ensuing dialogue, focuses mainly on modulation and very little on techniques of expansion. What we may find remarkable in this example, on the other hand, is that so many of its measures do not belong to any comma or cadence-defined segment or expanded fourth-sum, but rather to insertion between such phrases, especially insertions of repetition clauses veered through pitch alteration. Here, Riepel employs the exit clauses that he illustrated in example 589, which he says the composer repeats constantly with pitch alteration. When such repetition clauses occur within a comma-defined phrase, they are always limited to single repetition. But between phrases, they form the basis of somewhat unpredictable tonal excursion in which regular phrase rhythm is disrupted. Example 590, however, returns to a more familiar and controlled approach. Let's see now this section. Eight some phrase, cesura defined for some with pitch alteration. To, 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 to. Mi fa sol re mi fa sol, mi fa sol re mi fa, fa mi re do su. Changing comma. These four measures are in unison and based on the goldfinch, the repetition. Okay, pam 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 pam. Mi fa sol re mi fa sol, mi fa sol re mi fa do re mi fa mi re do su. Then insertion of a fonte. Here once again several scales are placed one after another. Sol 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 ta ti detto. Fa 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 la sol fa mi fa. That's a fonte. D minor and C major. Sol sol. G minor and F major, another fonte. Too many, in my opinion. Expanded ASM phrase with pitch alteration extended by repetition. Repetition of the last bar. Do fa sol re mi fa do fa de mi do re mi fa do fa re mi do re mi fa do fa re. No. Again. Okay, that's an A, yeah, that's an A, that's why. It seems to be a C, no, that's an A. Repetition. Mi, re, do, sol, 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 fa, mi, re, do, re, fa, 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 la, do, fa, mi, fa. Fonte. Do, fa, mi, fa, la, fa, re, fa, re, ma, mi, ma, fa, fa, mi, do, fa, do. Now, comma in the fourth degree, because then we have changing comma in the fourth degree, because C is the fourth degree of F, and then repetition on F major. So, la, sol, la, pam, 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 D minor, tom, pam, 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 pi, pam, 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 ending with a cadence to A minor. Actually, I played one note wrong because I'm supposed to play D minor, because so probably this way with a 6/4. Let's see from this point. Yes. Good. Cadence to the 6th degree. Expanded ASM phrase, cesura defined for some with pitch alteration repeated. Then expanded ASM phrase, expansion is a repetition of these. Okay. Okay, so that's 4 plus 4, it becomes 12. Good. Then after this cadence, dun, dun, fa mi, our famous Mayer in the Galant style. Fa mi, fa mi, fa mi. Come on. Okay, fa mi, fa mi, fa mi. And then the repetition of the beginning, the reprise, la reprise. 8-some phrase expanded, cesura defined foursome with pitch alteration extended by repetition. Mi fa sol re mi fa do, mi fa sol re mi fa do, pa 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 da 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 da, fa 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 da 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 da, so 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 da 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 da, la 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 fa la so so fa mi po po pa 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 pa. The bass could be po pa 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 pa. Okay, or then cesuras pam 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 mi fa sol re mi fa re the repetition after pam 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 mi fa sol re mi fa re fa sol re mi fa re mi. No, what do I'm doing again? Mi fa sol re mi fa re mi do re mi fa re mi do re mi fa re mi da pa 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 fa da 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 fa re da 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 da. Radical expansion of a cesura defined foursome by pitch alteration and repetition. Pa 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 sol do mi fa sol re mi fa do mi fa sol re mi fa la tu tu tira tu ta ta tam. Then ending with an andante. So pa 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 pam fonte pam. Then extended 8-some phrase, cesura defined foursome with pitch alteration. Sol fa mi sol fa re fa fa mi fa mi fa sol mi la fa mi re sol mi fa pom mi do la. So extended by veiled repetition. Okay, extend some phrase. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the cadence, tonic cadence, mi re do la fa te do sol fa mi. This is useful for having a transition to the fifth degree G and to start the final allegro. This one. Final allegro. 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, tira tom. Pam pa 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 sol sol fa mi re do sol sol fa mi fa sol do fa la ma fa. Nice. 8-some phrase, cesura defined foursome shaped by pitch alteration. One, 2, 3, 4. Pam pal fa mi sol sol fa mi pam. Cadence in the fifth degree. Then insertion of a fonte. So as you can see, we have 1 and 2, then 3, 2 repeated, 3, 2 repeated, almost the same with a little variation, and 3 instead of 3, 2, now 3 and 4, because we have to end with a cadence after the second group of 8 bar phrase. Good. black gradle, forte, sol sol fa mi re do sol sol fa mi re do sol la sol fa mi re sol mi fa la fa mi re do, where we have 1 2, then 2 3, 1 2 3 2 3 2 3 2, yes, 3 2 3 2 repeated, 3 2, and then 3 4, or even better, it's 1 2 3 2 3 2 3 2 3 2 3 1 2 3 4 repetitions, each time differently. Where the 4 belongs, so it overlaps with the first of the following one. Fa, do, mi, fa, la, sol, fa, mi, fa, ram, pam, pa, do, re, fa, re, sol, re, mi, fa, la, fa, sol, do, do. Then 1 2 3 and 1 and 2, or better than 1 2 3 2 3 repeated, and then 4, the last one, with the final tonic cadence. What makes example 590 seems more controlled is the number of measures contained within commas or cadence-defined phrase. I totally agree. The nearly total restriction of repetition to the internal expansion of such phrases and the nearly exclusive use of sequences as insertion between such phrases. So the nearly total restriction of repetition to internal phrases, to internal expansion of such phrases, the third movement of this example abundantly illustrates repetition of metrical units. The third movement of this example abundantly illustrates repetition of metrical units, especially units 2 and 3. Exactly, as we saw before, 2 and 3 are often repeated. Okay, and then there is the last symphony to analyze before the conclusion, and we'll do it now. Okay, let's see this new allegro. So, cesura defined for some 1, 2, 3, and 4. Of course, 1, 2, 3, and 4 with the cesura in the middle. Cesura. Then, alla breve time, repetition close varied through pitch alteration. So, mi, do, mi, sol, sol, mi, fa, re, re, mi, fa, mi, do, mi, sol, sol, mi, sol, la, re, mi, fa, la, sol, fa, mi, fa, do, mi, fa, pam, 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 fa, mi, re, pam, 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 pam. It says 3 whole or common measures in succession. By means of repetition of pitch alteration, okay, because then 3 whole or common measure in succession by means of repetition of pitch alteration. Again, sol, 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 sol. Of course, this makes sense in a wider context. Pum, pum, pum. Repetition close, okay, 1 and 2, then pam 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 pam, repetition, and then pam 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 sol pam 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 pam, repetition, then 3 pam 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 pam. 3 and 4, and the phrase concludes with a comma at the fifth, changing comma and the fifth at the fifth. Even if it's more of 5 and 1, 5 to D. Sol, sol, la, sol, 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 la, sol, fa, mi, re, mi, fa. Incomplete comma, incomplete tonic comma in the fifth. Sol, 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 la, sol, 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 fa, mi, re, pi, fa. Mi, pam, 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 pa, pam, para, pam. So repetition close. Pa, pam, 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 pa, pam, para, pam. Mi, sol, sol, fa, mi, re, do, mi, sol, fa, mi, re, do, mi, sol, fa, mi, re, do, mi. Then repetition close, veered through pitch alteration, because here is mi, sol, and then another mi, sol, but two different notes. Then the whole or common measure in succession by means of repetition or pitch alteration. Mi, fa, sol, la, sol, la. Mi, fa, sol, la, sol, la, fa, mi, re. Mi, fa, sol, la, sol, la, fa, mi, re. No. Mi, fa, sol, la, fa, mi, re, fam, pa, para, la, fa. Pam, pam, pa, pa, pam, pam, pa, 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 pa. So 3, because there's a repetition. Pitch alteration and repetition. Pa, 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 pam, 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 pa, 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 pam, 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 pa, 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 pam, 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 pam. Continuation of a pattern. Again, the 3 whole or common measure in succession by means of repetition or pitch alteration. Then fa, la, 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 pa, pa, pam, pa, la, sol, sol, fa, la, fa, la, sol, fa. 3 repetition of pitch alteration, then insertion of unrelated material. Re, mi, fa, sol, la, so. Yes and no, because this creates a fonte. Insertion of unrelated material. Belin, pay attention, because from this point, fa, la, 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 ta, ta, la, sol, fa, la, fa, la, sol, fa, la, sol, sol, fa, mi, sol, fa, mi, la, sol. It's a fonte. Yes, it is. But even if I would do re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, mi, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, sol, fa. To start with mi, sol, the bar in the correct way. Otherwise, you feel a little of instability, because there is not unrelated material, but there is a repetition which I don't like so much. La, sol, fa, re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi. I would do a repetition like this. Re, mi, fa, sol, la, sol, fa, mi. To recall la, sol, fa, this, and then mi, sol, so I can start the fonte section in C major instead of D minor, the same way. La, sol, fa, mi, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, pam, do, re, mi, fa, mi, do, re, mi, fa. Alla breve time, mi, re, mi, fa, mi, do, mi, sol, pam, repetition like before. The repetitions like before. Sol, fa, la, mi, fa, sol, fa, la, sol, fa, mi, do, re, pam, para, pam, fa, mi, re, fa, la, fa, mi, re, sol, la, fa, mi, re, mi, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, fa, mi, re, fa, mi, fa, mi, re, la, fa, mi, re, mi, fa, sol, re, mi, fa, sol, la, mi, fa, sol, wam, wam, wam. Example 604, like example 579, this is 604, right? Yes, continuation, okay, of course. Is expanded principally by the insertion of repetition clauses, where through pitch alteration between comma or cadence-defined phrases. These repetition clauses include both these repetition clauses include those marked by the sin cross, which refers to the discantis remark. I find three whole or common measures in succession. This happens by means of repetition or pitch alteration. I interpret that to signal a change to alla breve style in which a whole common time measure forms the basic metrical unit, and repetition with pitch alteration that creates a clause. The repetition clause is not marked with a sin cross. The repetition clauses not marked with the sin cross are understood to be set in normal compound common time, in which each metrical unit equals half a measure. The comma or cadence-defined phrases, the comma or cadence-defined phrases themselves are either unexpanded or are prolonged through their repetition. A few general conclusions may be offered. Although Riepel communicating through its preceptor and discanti does not offer a complete analysis or even a detailed commentary of his musical examples, it is not difficult to supply what is lacking. Using the constant vocabulary and symbols provided by the first two chapters of Riepel treatise, one may account for every measure in these examples. In doing so, it becomes clear that comma and cadence-defined phrases are internally expanded from their irreducible form. They often hypothetical foursome or eightsome principally by two means: internal repetition, with or without variation or elision, and internal elaboration by means of pitch alteration. But expansion of entire movements or often extended, but expansion of entire movements or of other expanded examples that consist of several phrases makes more frequent use of insertion between but expansion of entire movements or of other extended examples that consist of several phrases makes more frequent use of insertion between comma or cadence-defined segment, although strict melodic harmonic sequences and sequential harmonic progression and sequential harmonic progressions without rhythmically repetitive melodic sequences are found. Riepel's full movement examples tend to favor insertion of repetition clauses varied by means of pitch alteration. Although strict melodic harmonic sequences and sequential harmonic progression without rhythmically repetitive melodic sequences are found, okay. This places his extended examples generally within the mid-18th century Grand style category that stands between the late Baroque with its fourth Spannungstipus movement, in which regular melodic harmonic sequences are typically inserted between comma or cadence-defined phrase, and the classical style in which nearly all expansion takes place within and the classical style in which nearly all expansion takes place within, and not between such phrases. In which nearly all expansion take places within such phrases. Okay. Remarkably, however, analytical tools based on Riepel's theory work quite well for analyzing music of all three style categories, as I hope will become clear in the demonstration offered in the following two essays. And now we have other two essays, very interesting two essays, which are an analysis of this concerto, Graun, and then after this Antonio Vivaldi, a sinfonia. Antonio Vivaldi, another sinfonia. There are many things. Then Mozart, and we'll have fun to find this in Mozart, Vivaldi, and other composers. So see you in the next videos. Okay, and now I really have to go. So we'll continue.